My name is Frank Mazzella. I'm the Learning Products Manager for Vision Research. I'm here to present a series of PCC, Phantom Camera Control software tutorials intended to show you many of the various features and processes incorporated in PCC. In this tutorial, using Frame Rate Profile Part 2, Ramp to Change, we will detail the steps necessary to use this unique feature. Before I start, I need to point out the Frame Rate Profile feature is only supported by Phantom cameras manufactured prior to late 2011, the PA7 camera models, not the cameras manufactured from 2012, the PA16 camera models to date. Frame Rate Profile allows the user to define different sample rates that automatically change by either ramping up or down to the next frame rate, the default method, or at user-specified points during the capture process of post-trigger frames for either method. However, the initial profile can be applied to pre-trigger frames, with the frame rate profile change being applied to post-trigger frames only. For example, let's say we want to capture the fin deployment, separation, and targeting of a projectile at high speed, and as it travels downrange, it's recorded at near real-time speed. This function also helps extend the recording time and helps keep file sizes as small as possible. So what do we need to do? Let's talk about how to define this feature to ramp up or down to another frame rate. I'm going to disable, then re-enable the Frame Rate Profile feature to clear the frame rate table. In the Using Frame Rate Profile Part 1 Step to Change tutorial, I used image numbers to mark the frame rate changes. For this tutorial, I'm going to use the time in seconds option. Notice I have a little over 7 seconds of post-trigger duration, or the amount of time it takes to fill the post-trigger buffer. So I'm simply going to enter an arbitrary time in seconds I want the frame rate changes to take place. The camera has been set to record its pre-trigger frames at 5,000 frames per second. Therefore, the frame rates will ramp up or down based on the rate of the first entry. Just as I did in Part 1, I'll enter my changes in the last line of the table, the line with the asterisk, and hit the Enter key. For this tutorial, I'm going to define the first rate change to 10,000 frames per second, 1.5 seconds into filling the post-trigger buffer. Like it did when I stepped the rate changes in Part 1 of the Using the Frame Rate Profiles tutorial, the PT duration changes based on the time it takes to fill the post-trigger buffer at the frame rates the camera is recording at. Now I'll have the camera ramp down to a minimum of 1,000 frames per second 1.5 seconds later, at the 3-second mark. So I'll enter 3 seconds in the time field and 1,000 frames per second in the rate field, and hit the Enter key. Finally, I'll ramp the camera up to 20,000 frames per second at the 4-second mark. Notice the camera finishes by ramping down to 5,000 frames per second because the end time is set at 5,000 frames per second. Notice how the rate graph, the yellow line, ramps up and down to the next frame rate change, displayed in magenta. It is a graphical representation of how the post-trigger buffer is used based on the intervals and frame rate changes we just defined. Okay, let's record the cine using the frame rate profile I just defined by clicking the capture button to start the recording process. Now I'll click the Yes button in the Delete Existing RAM Cines and proceed to the new recording confirmation window. Wait for the pre-trigger buffer to record its frames, and apply a soft trigger to the camera by clicking the trigger button. Notice the camera is recording its post-trigger frames. Now, let's open the cine we just recorded by clicking on the Play tab, and jump to the trigger or T0 frame by clicking the T button, then play the cine using the Play Video Control button. Notice how the frame interval time starts to decrease. Once the cine reaches image number 11,250, notice how the frame interval time is increasing. The increasing and decreasing of the frame interval happens because the frame rates the cine was recorded at were ramping upward or downward to the next frame rate specified. Before we finish this tutorial, I want to disable or uncheck the frame rate profile feature for the next user of this camera. Otherwise, they might not know that frame rate profile is defined and accidentally capture a cine using these settings. So that concludes the Using Frame Rate Profile Part 2 Ramp to Change tutorial, where you learned how frame rate profile works and how to ramp frame rate changes. For in-depth Phantom operations, Vision Research offers Phantom Operations Certification Training. Please visit our training webpage at www.phantomhighspeed.com, Service Support, Training. Or contact your local sales representative, who can be found on our website under the Contact Us pull-down selection list for more information about our training sessions, or for Phantom cameras in general.